Hello, hello, beautiful people. Milissa Bradshaw here, your host of the Embodied Marriage Podcast, and I'm here with my handsome husband.
That would be me, Chuck Bradshaw, your co-host, and I'm here to balance her depth and beauty with my humor.
Together, we are committed to bringing you open-hearted conversations around our experiences. This podcast is for you if you are somebody that's not willing to sacrifice your health or your marriage while building a fulfilling business and living a life of no regrets. Hello there.
Hello. You kind of threw me because you usually say hello there, beautiful people.
Right. Maybe I'll be less words today.
Okay.
Just going with it.
Okay.
I mean, we did, hello there, beautiful people. We did title this, The Importance of Giving Yourself Grace. And with that, you guys, thanks for all the feedback so far. I'm loving it. We'll have a way in which you can directly give it to us in regards to maybe some unique questions or topics that you may want us to listen to if you're not in my inner world, if you're not a client of mine or whatnot. So, there I go again. You guys, yeah, like this is all like really, just stepping into giving myself grace, giving ourselves grace, accepting what is and owning where we're at with the passion for where we're going and knowing that okay, so let me just get into this. When it comes to authenticity, I think that that's been one of my greatest challenges. And, it's like, I think all of us, are just kind of figuring ourselves out as we do. And then it's like, once we grow and have a new identity and shed the old, then it's like, oh, well, then that's a different version of authenticity. And for me, this topic of grace is just, for somebody that's experienced chronic pain, invisible illnesses, and so much more, just becoming connected within my mind and my body and all this, it's that, of course, you guys may listen to this and say, well, yeah, but especially for a woman with hormones that's complex, like we're not expected to show up the same, or I shouldn't say we're expected. Sometimes we put that expectation on ourselves. However, when we can give ourselves the permission of just allowing ourselves to show up as we are, it's so much more freeing. Do you agree?
I agree. I couldn't possibly agree to the depth of a woman, but yeah, I agree.
All right, but just in general, and to know that, there's already been so many different things that we've discovered about ourselves in this process as we're working on a rhythm and, building this podcast, and just decided, of course, because we're going to bring you 2 a week. So I just decided to go full force with this podcast. There's been some, I guess I would call them hiccups or, just learning curves. And it's just like, okay, ready for the ride, showing up as we are. So for this topic of grace, let's get into it. I feel like that is the absolute most essential thing for us to be able to, us as in like you all listening as well,
Definitely.
Is until we learn and discover the grace that we need within ourselves and then actually act upon it, like not just know it, not just talk about it, but be about it, we're not going to have that ability or capacity to be able to give grace to our partners or all the people in our world, right? So I have been really disciplined and leading the way with that, right? Like, I know a client had said, you really unplug on the weekends. And I'm like, yes, I do. Like, I'm not just talking about it. Like, it's, it's not always going to be the same. But the work in self-mastery is truly done in the stillness and in the quietness and unplugging from the busyness of the world.
Right. And I agree with that. I think, like you said, we have to learn to give ourselves grace first and foremost. And I find for me, it's harder for me to give myself grace. I can give grace to someone else before me. And that may be because I somewhat hold myself to this standard. And there's nothing wrong with holding yourself to a standard. But when it gets to the point of perfectionism, then that can be pretty difficult to give yourself grace because none of us are perfect. You know, that old saying that practice makes perfect, that's not true. Practice makes better.
Practice makes better. We were just talking. Okay, so this is really good because I'm constantly saying we're weeding the weeds, watering the seeds, we're paving a path for ourselves. And with that, there's no room for judgment. There's no room for self-judgment. And the more you're conscious about those inner thoughts, the things you're saying to yourself, that's what's going to ultimately create the capacity. So if you're listening to this and you're like, gosh, you know, I have this strong desire for my spouse to change or to do this or to do that, right? Like you get irritated or you have resentment or frustration or whatever. I would ask you to kind of sit with yourself and reflect upon, are you judging yourself in the same ways that you're expecting them to be a certain way? Or are you giving yourself that compassion? And if you're putting more pressure or expectation on your spouse, right? Because a lot of that comes from yourself, right. not truly leading yourself.
I like that. They say typically when you judge somebody, it's more about you than about them.
100%.
So
hey, let's get into that. That's juicy.
That's very juicy.
Okay. That's very juicy. Okay. Can I talk about you?
I didn't start that with that intention, but go ahead. Go right ahead.
All right. Well, see, you guys, I love this because I know some of the things that I want to talk about in real time. However, you know, the podcast is going to be released on Monday, so we're going to get into that as well, like putting more intention into this process. But the whole part of judgment, this just brought me up to, you know how you're more confident around confident people? It is, because I'll tell you, because they're not judging themselves as much. They're not, you know, weak on that grace and that, you know, love and compassion for themselves. So you're like, you just almost like you take your shell off or you take your, you know, your mask off, like, phew, right? Like, because the more somebody judges themselves, the more, and others, it feels like, ooh, at least this has been my experience. I'm going to speak from my experience, right? And when Chuck and I got together, can I go here? When Chuck and I got together, the amount of him like judging other people really put me into a shell. It made me feel, he took a deep breath, y'all. It made me feel like, ooh, well, if you're saying that ignorance, let's just say it, because it is what it is. Like, now we know better and we're doing better. When you said something ignorant about somebody else, like let's just say a woman walking in the store, I'm like, wait a minute, what about me, right? Like, so.
Does he judge me?
Yeah, I think just, like I said, being around confident people. And so we all have our, you know, our egos and our masks and all of that. Like, I always look at you as being a confident person, but we all have them, you know, the insecurities and whatnot. So
definitely,
if you're listening to this, the way that you can support your spouse the most is by not being, you know, somebody to talk about other people or, you know, judge other people or whatever, because really, you're, like you said, you're just kind of like, there's something in there for you to see about yourself.
Right. And I do remember, and honestly, that would bother you like, wow, if I would say something about it. It could be either a guy or a girl. And, you know, I honestly have to say that behavior was almost a learned behavior. I grew up watching my dad do that same thing.
100%.
And so to me, that was normal. And now that I've come to understand that judging somebody else is really because I have some judgments about myself. And I think that sometimes makes us feel better. It takes the attention off of us if we can place it onto the next person. So
Yeah, it goes within the dynamics of a marriage, right? It's like, oh, if I don't look at myself and if I blame you, or it's like I don't have to take full responsibility. And that's what this is all about, is we're uncovering, patterns and all of these different things that we've learned and been around, and so we can give grace and compassion for those that we've learned from. However, we can also have the courage to change.
that's the big part right there, change. And I think it's important when you can uncover that and realize where that came from. And sometimes you're not going to realize where it came from. What's important is having the self-awareness of that behavior and having the willingness to change that behavior. And I think I'm good at that now. I'm really good at that now.
Yeah.
I've learned to, if I have a thought, number one, I keep it to myself, and number two, I quickly get rid of it. And that's been the most important thing that I found through all of this is you are responsible for your own thoughts. Nobody can put a thought in your head but yourself. So that's the importance of realizing that.
So you're responsible for reframing your thoughts, but understanding that your thoughts are not, they don't have to be your truth, right? Like
Right.
have you guys ever listened or like had a bad thought and you're like, ooh, where'd that come from? Like, oh, like you feel bad because you had that thought. That's not yours. That's okay. You can just like, my clients know, it's like we get the punching bags out. They're like thoughts. Actually, I think I remember like this GIF or whatever you call it, like of Shaq or something, where he's like boxing his negative thoughts or something like that. I remember seeing. It's kind of the same thing. These thoughts come in, and that's like, oh, that one doesn't make me feel good. Okay, phew,
Exactly.
reframe that. But I want to go back to this way of just society and the way that we do, and something that I've been saying for many, many years. And as I've filtered out lost friends, and I mean, for all different reasons, but I just don't feel good within a friend group or whatnot when it's like, I always say this to Chuck, and this doesn't have anything personally like within our friends or anything, but why be friends with somebody that you complain about?
Oh,
I'm like, that just, it just
wow.
brings me back to just so many different, partnerships. And it's not your fault, right? Like if you guys are listening to this, it's not your fault. That's just how we all grew up. That's what we bond, right? Like we bond on
Right.
gossiping or talking shit about somebody else. And it's like, okay, cool. That's great. I didn't realize, but now I get to change it. And even if you've already been practicing this kind of life, it can only get better when you are a leader of love and you are intentionally by yourself in mastery, thinking powerful thoughts about the people that you love, people that are not even in your life, and you realize the effect of your thoughts on them. That's true light in my opinion. Like giving people grace that you're like, yeah, I can love you from afar. I'll send you
Right.
blessings, but I'm not going to continue to talk shit about you or think bad about you or wish bad upon you. Instead, I'm going to send you love. So imagine if that's the people that are not even in your world, but the people that are in your inner circle, if you can be the one to lead, because ultimately that the way that you're doing that is coming from giving yourself grace. That's how you've been able to have the capacity to do so. I'm talking a little bit fast.
Yeah, you are.
So it's like I want to get this out, and I know how I'm feeling today. And if I slow down, my mind sometimes slows down as well.
Well, back to you saying that. I always go back to something you said because it's always like a good nugget.
Was this even a conversation? I mean, you're my co-host. We're just kind of like ping ponging
Well,
off
yeah,
of.
and I think that's the best thing to do.
That's
I mean,
good.
I like that we're not scripted. I'm not reading a piece of paper or a whiteboard. But you always said to me, why be friends with somebody that you complain about? For one, that's negative energy, and you're wasting your time complaining about that person. But there was a meme. I don't know if you call them memes, where it's just a
Quote or
statement, a
something.
quote. It says, "Don't sit at the table with people who gossip about others, because the minute you get up and leave, you're the new topic of discussion."
Boom, chakalaka laka. Take that one home. It is. And we had this conversation. I remember you and I had this conversation at the dining room table.
Me and you?
Probably like a week ago or something. I don't know. And it was like, how you don't, that whole idea of people kind of like the era of who the F does she think she is, right? Like,
Right.
it's, we want to be a space that somebody, okay, so I'm talking in different ways when I'm speaking this way, as far as my relationship personally with clients or acquaintances or colleagues or friends or family members, whatever. Everything's a little bit different. But when you're not the one that is partaking in the conversation, it will ultimately allow for that person to kind of reflect on themselves. And especially if you do it over and over.
Right.
Now, if somebody's in your proximity or you're in a conversation with them and they are instantly like aware of the things that they're saying, how do we say that? How are we talking about? I'm like, that's actually a good thing,
That's a
right?
really good thing.
It doesn't mean that, oh, I'm going to judge you. It doesn't mean that you can't be negative. This isn't about negative and positive, right? Like, I mean, I'm not in my best mood. I mean, I'm feeling some hormonal stuff going on, but having the awareness is enough.
Yeah, and I know what you're talking about. You're saying if you're around somebody and typically their conversation is, I don't know, gossipy or pessimistic, but just being in your presence, it kind of makes them pull in the reins, and they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, yeah, I don't want to talk about that with you."
Yeah, I think did we talk about this on the previous podcast about boundaries? I'm not sure. Something about, we have so many conversations about, the people that are closest to you. Was that the conversation we were saying?
I don't recall. We've done numerous podcasts.
Or just within your marriage, right? Like my steadiness, my not fighting back. Well, the same kind of dynamic happens within your personal life. Anybody, really. This is all about alignment, you guys, right? Like we're talking about aligning the highest version of you, what matters most to your marriage and to your business. And so, but inevitably people will fall off. Inevitably people will either grow or fall off.
Oh,
It's
yes.
not always a conscious decision like peace out, deuces, right? Like sometimes it just happens
It's just the
that way.
uncomfortableness being around you. That's why they fall off, and it's not a conscious decision. They get to a point where, like you said, who the boop does she think she is? And they get to a point where I can't be around that person anymore because they're starting to feel some type of way themselves. And that's a very strong boundary right there. It's a boundary in and of itself because they're realizing I can't go there with you. That's not what you're about. And either they jump on board with that or they, like you said, fall off.
And that's how I've learned
Deuces.
or how I got to where I am now is just the past several years investing in people that have had, emotional regulation, emotional intelligence, the mindset, all of these different things. And, oh my heck.
Well, it's very, very important to have emotional regulation. And I think that's
He's talking to himself.
I think that's a powerful, powerful tool to have in your, as you used to call it, your tool pouch or your tool belt. Emotions are everything. Control your emotions and you ultimately control your life.
Yes. And one thing that I wanted to add for you guys listening and following us, which is so awesome.
Awesome.
There's no judgment, right? So if you're like, oh, shoot, I just was gossiping about Susie Q or whatever, like,
Or
that's
little
okay.
Debbie.
That's okay. You just give yourself grace. We're only striving to be 1% to 2% better every day, unless
That's
you're
it.
massively obsessed. But that's where the grace comes in. It's like, oh, am I making progress? I'm having the awareness, so that's progress in it itself.
Exactly.
This conversation is not to rattle up any kind of judgment for anybody that's listening. This conversation is obviously to bring you into your awareness and activate you to come into more alignment with a higher consciousness so that you can truly be the best version of yourself.
And ultimately, that's what matters. Leaving a legacy to be the best version of yourself.
You've been using this word legacy a lot.
Because that's important.
Okay.
If I leave nothing else on this earth, it's for people, the kids, to see that
Choice.
Yeah, choice matters. Proximity matters. There's always a consequence for your choice. Okay, are we pausing right there, or are we taking a break?
You know what that is?
What?
Let's talk about it, guys. That's your uncomfortableness with silence, as he's come a long way, we'll just say. So anybody that's listening to this that knows us personally is probably chuckling.
No,
But
they're not.
I am 100% okay in silence and to give myself time to think. And Chuck's been a filler. So I love this. We're growing with you, y'all. Chuck's been a filler. He is very funny. He just is that way. I've brought to his attention that is his purpose, to be the best version of yourself. When you're coming, we hear so many comedians talk about why they're comedians and whatnot. Like, we don't have to go
And
all into that.
everything.
Yeah. Why do I always say that? I don't know.
And whatnot and everything.
Stop. Gosh, you guys. Like, so for this episode, give yourself grace. How can you be a grace giver, right? So it's the beginning of the week. How can you treat yourself, be kinder to yourself, give yourself more compassion, and know your why? Not only for you guys that have been in my world for many years, you know that my ultimate desire has been self-freedom, right? I've been the mean girl, the bully, like to myself, so on. And we all are to a certain extent. But how can we even be more of a grace giver? That's your foundation. That's your foundation going into any relationship, any business, any partnership, is when you're the one that's giving the most grace, it just gives the other person permission to do the same. Did I already say that? That's all right.
It don't matter. You got to hammer it home. You can never say it too much.
That's true.
And I like how you said this week. Practice it this week, giving somebody grace when you're driving down the road, and I've been getting really good at this.
Oh, yeah, I like this.
And somebody pulls out in front of you, breathe, give them grace. You don't know what they're going through, what just happened. They could have lost their job, a loved one. You just never know. And there's been times I've been driving on autopilot, had no clue where I was at or even how I got home. So that's a big one. Start with that road rage that you're dealing with. Give them some grace and compassion, and it'll get easier and easier. I'm not perfect. And that's the thing she was saying. We're not on here claiming to be perfect. It does get easier, and you'll have more self-awareness, but grace is such a powerful thing.
And following that, when your old self and your shadow shows up, that's when the grace is even more important.
Boom.
We don't judge ourselves, right? So if somebody pulls out this afternoon when we're in town and you act a fool, it's how much time are you going to spend in being irritated, having your feathers ruffled? And I think we could probably talk about road rage on a whole
We don't have to.
podcast on its own. You guys listening, you're probably like, yeah. But I'm back here like, if you guys have been following me on social media, you know that I have been saying for the past several years that my most significant client, or however I've been saying, has been Chuck here. And just to hear him speak about road rage is so beautiful and so powerful, because it's so true. When we're practicing these mindfulness and just, giving grace and leading with love, it's not just in your house, it's to everybody out there. That's what's going to fill you up.
Yes.
And I noticed that. I think I was telling you that the other week. I was just like, and I'm not usually like this at all, but I just noticed somebody was slow in front of me, and it gave me an opportunity to see how irritable I was. And I came home and told Chuck about it, because it's been something that I've been talking about for quite some time, is you never know if that person is, let's say, driving slow because they were in a, horrible accident or just anything, right? Like, and so, or like you said, like, just gone through something hard. And I always say that too. It's like, let's carry on this grace that we're giving ourselves, to have the curiosity for others. Always be curious. Always. My clients are warriors. My clients have secret pain a lot of times for a long time, kind of by themselves, whether they've been in masterminds or therapy or programs or had friends or whatnot. It's important to have that intimate one-to-one mentorship, and that's why I do what I do, because we collapse time. When you have a safe space to really truly feel like, you know, you can express your shadow parts. Like you're not very proud of your road rage, are you?
Not at all.
Because, like I said, we promised to bring you an episode. He's over there in resistance, like we don't have to talk about it.
I am not in resistance whatsoever. What I'm thinking is sometimes you'll say something, and I'll find this happens a lot, and I'm trying to hold on to it so I can come back and talk about it or something. But you said we're not perfect, and I'm not saying that I don't ever have road rage, but it's how long I stay in that and how long it takes me to realize, okay, that was not necessary. Sometimes you'll speed up and speed around somebody, and it's just a little old guy just driving along, and you feel stupid.
So can I bring something to light here pertaining to you right now?
Yeah, sure.
This is just all happening naturally, you guys. I love. So the reason why you're waiting for me to stop speaking and you're holding on to what you have to say is because you're not fully in the moment, right? He's looking at me like, oh my heck, y'all. We'll leave that aside. However, back to the road rage, you know what I used to always say to him? I used to say, would you say that or act like that in front of your mom or your daughter? Right? Like, would you?
That was a good one.
So that I was really intending to show him that he had control, even though he thought or, you know, that because when he would act a fool in the car, it's like, oh, my nervous system just did not appreciate that, just kind of like messed up the whole road trip. And there was times when I was just like, hey, you've got to be on your P's and Q's for me to get in the car with you.
That's true.
So
that is true.
When you give yourself that grace, when you get to know yourself and you know that there's better, then you can be a spillover for everybody around you.
And, you know, for people out there dealing with that road rage, that's what she did, and it worked. Would you act like this in front of your grandmother, your mom, your daughter? And I'd stop and think, well, no, I would not. So therefore, I have control over it. Yeah, I like that.
Okay, but we got to sprinkle in truth as well.
What's the truth?
It absolutely did not happen the first time that I said that.
Well, no.
There might have been 200 times I said that.
Well, I'm talking about right now.
Okay.
Past is in the past.
Cool. So I hope that you guys listening, I hope you've just kind of like, you know, maybe chuckled, had some ahas, awarenesses, like, oh, okay, I'm this way. I'd like to give myself more grace, or my partner or whatever. Like, take what serves you, leave the rest, right? And if you know that you're loving this conversation, obviously, plug in and come back for more. Do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I mean, I think it's funny because she's so put me on blast. If you guys can see me looking at her on some of the comments, but that's why we're here, to be completely vulnerable and open. And actually, I love it because it calls me out on my own BS.
Well, I'm already well aware, especially having a private podcast as well. I'm already well aware that this is going to just, you guys, I think I said that on a different episode. I'm like, if nobody listened to this, this is for us, because Chuck's really stepping into it even more radical ownership of his own power, his emotional intelligence, being able to regulate his emotions and reframe his thoughts and understand that, oh, those aren't mine.
Right.
I can choose something different. So
That's
this is
power.
beautiful.
That's the
this
power.
is the power. And like we've said before, this took us some time, y'all, like to be able to get here and share vulnerably. And I guess I'm proud and excited, and we'll be back for more.
Well, thank you. I'm proud of you.
Very proud. Thank you.
Okay. Well, with that being said, we will sign off for today. Again, we will be bringing you more podcasts Mondays and Thursdays. So, hey, have a good day and peace.
And love. Thank you so much for joining the Embodied Marriage Podcast. If you're finding any value from this, could you please go ahead and subscribe and leave us a review? It allows for our message to get out to more people just like you.